Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Graham Uvina, and tonight we're talking about cheaters. Cheaters, that's right. The title of this episode will be called Cheater, Cheater, Pumpkin Eater, and it's because I think that baseball is a great game, right? But I like to talk about stories and events that happened on the fringe, and it's a reality, a fact that cheating happens in baseball. And I thought, let's make this episode about that. Let's talk about all the ways you can cheat in baseball, all of the times that people have been caught cheating, all the people who didn't get caught, but later wrote about it, and, of course, the best years of all time. Ever hear of Gaylord Perry? Ever hear of Burleigh Grimes or Joe Niekro or Rick Honeycutt or any of those guys? Because they've all have incredible stories about their time on the baseball field, scuffing baseballs up, spitting on the ball, adding pine tar, paraffin, KY jelly, Vaseline, anything they can think of to add or remove spin from the ball in flight. That's one way to cheat. There's more, of course. You can tamper with the bat, the equipment, the field itself. You can flash signs or try to steal them somehow. There are all kinds of ways you can cheat in baseball. So I want to make this episode about that. I have a book that I've got to read in front of you, and I've got the internet, and of course I've got a plethora of stories and ideas from my own past. So the idea here is that this will be a fun episode. Baseball today is kind of boring. Not much is happening contemporary-wise. I can tell you what's going on. That's my job. But I wanted to let you know that coming up at the end of this segment is some really good stuff. Stick around for that. So first, contemporary baseball. You know, off topic, but my cat Lily is now asleep on my lap. And she's a good girl. She's sleepy tonight right now. I brought some water up to help hydrate me during the episode. And the second I closed the door, Lily jumped up and started drinking the water. So now it's her water, I guess. I can't drink after that, but who knows. And yeah, just kind of funny. Just a cute cat. All right. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that the Twins are now officially the worst team in baseball. I believe at one point they were the first best team in baseball for at least a few weeks, and yet they've just collapsed. I don't have their stats right now on how they've done over the last month or last week, but holy cow, they are now the worst team in baseball, and the Giants are the best, which has just blown my mind. I would never expect that the Twins, if their roster advantages, would have such a poor standing, but the Giants to rise to the occasion. And as an NL West Diamondbacks fan, I kind of wish that wasn't the case. But it is what it is. And of course, they're joined by other teams like the Tigers and the Royals, who aren't doing great either. And there's a lot of anticipation over tanking these days. The strategy in baseball historically has been you build a good team, you sign free agents, you trade players, and you try to win every season. If you can't win, it is what it is. But in baseball, it's more economical now to tank. Tanking if guys, you hear like a little like a soft sound in the background, like that's my cat licking my arm. Lily thinks I'm just like a huge hairless cat that doesn't speak her language, so she like licks me sometimes as you would like a newborn kitten, and it's just kind of funny. So I got to deal with this now for a few minutes. So there's this new thing in baseball where tanking is considered to be more economical. It's cheaper to lose almost every game than it is to win almost every game. You do realize that, right? Because if you have to spend money to buy free agents and to sign international free agents and to trade for good players and to give your star players contracts, it's just going to be expensive. But you can always lose a game. With any old scrub you can find, it's really easy. So, for that reason alone, many teams that know they're not going to compete with the Dodgers and the Yankees of the world just kind of make an effort to deliver a profit to their shareholders, but also not really try to win that all hard. Because the idea is that if you lose, you will get an early pick in the next draft. So if you like are the worst team in baseball, you will get the number 1 overall pick in the draft of the following year. I kind of think that's not a good idea. Because here's the thing about human behavior. Humans obey incentives, right? If you incentivize somebody, if you give somebody a reason to do something, they will do it. And the problem now with giving teams an early pick guaranteed if they suck is that now the incentive to try to field a good team for lots of teams is gone. Now, if you are an average team, sure, it might make sense to continue to try to compete. You never know. A lucky break, an injury, maybe your team will compete. But most won't. And there are plenty of teams that just understand that they're always going to be perpetually moribund until they get a new owner. And when that happens, until that happens, they're going to tank. And I think we need to change that. I'd be in favor of a random lottery generator. So your performance isn't tied to your draft pick. That might be a good way to ensure that everybody at least tries harder. Or you can just simply give the best pick to the teams that play the best. Now, it wouldn't be fair if the Dodgers always won it, so maybe you can just do your team's win-loss record in relation to the Pythagorean win theorem. Let me say that. Maybe a good way to assign draft picks is you assign them in decreasing order of the teams that overperformed their predicted performance. So, if, let's say a team that's perfectly average was going to go 81-81 predicted, but they instead went 91-71, they get the first overall pick. The Dodgers won 107 games, but if they were predicted to win 106, then they get the 15th overall pick. Maybe that's the way to do it. Now, you'd have to trust the Pythagorean win theorem prediction, but still, I think that's a good way to do it because the goal is one, to reward teams for trying. You could do a random draft pick lottery. You could do predicted performance versus actual performance as a way to assign it. You could just give the best pick to the teams that do the best, although that probably isn't fair either. But I think that trying to solve the problem of how do we make teams more competitive by giving teams a reason to not be competitive, that makes no sense. So that's just something that I just thought I'd mention because I'm on the Reddit thread right now about the Twins not being a good team. And someone just mentioned that, hey, maybe next year we'll get Elijah Green, who's a really great prospect for 2022. I was just sitting here thinking, that shouldn't happen. Bad teams should be punished for being bad. Of course, they should be punished. They should be rewarded for effort. But you should reward teams who make no effort to even try. We don't want that to happen. So that was interesting. I wanted just to mention that. More news. So, Corbin Burnes is a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, and he set a Major League record this evening. So, he has now struck out 52 batters without allowing a single walk, which is a streak that has just been broken. I mean, before him, it was held by Kenley Jansen, the reliever. A reliever, not a starter. And before that, the starter that held the record for most strikeouts before giving up a walk was Adam Wainwright with like 39. Burnes blew way past that. And he walked someone later that game, of course, but still, 52 strikeouts, 1 walk to begin the season. All-time record. And I'm upset because during the fantasy baseball league that I was participating in a few weeks ago, Corbin Burnes was the first overall pick we had. I picked Mookie Betts. And because it was a serpentine draft, had to wait a long time for our next pick. So sitting there waiting, I was looking at the available players like Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres and Whit Merrifield and guys like that. And I remember as the clock continued to go on, I saw more and more good players getting snapped up. I remember 5 picks out, I looked up at the available players and saw Corbin Burnes. And I was thinking, okay, if Corbin Burnes is still on the clock when I get to pick again, I'm going with him. And of course, 2 picks before I got mine, someone picked Corbin Burnes, so that didn't happen. But, I mean, I kind of knew he was going to have a great year. And he has just been dominating. I believe there's an interview where Burnes said that he changed up his mechanics to focus on cocking his arm earlier. So there's an article by 538 which talked about how some pitchers, including Lucas Giolito and Joe Musgrove, and Shane Bieber, of course, and incidentally Corbin Burnes, have changed up their pitching styles to hide the ball better while they pitch. So what that means is that when you throw a ball, like right now, just play along, follow me along with this. Stand up as if you're about to throw a pitch and just kind of swing your arm back. Like you kick your leg up, you break your hands, you put the ball down, you rotate it back up. It's now by your ear. You pivot, you throw. That's called throwing a baseball. Now think about this for a second. What's the batter's perspective in all of that? Because if you swing your arm and it crosses your back, the batter can see the grip, or at least it can see if you're throwing a changeup or not. And don't ever underestimate how little of an edge a batter needs to dominate. When I was in Georgia, I used to live in Macon, Georgia. I had this pitching coach named Mike Mims. And Mims was a relief pitcher for the Phillies for a year. And during spring training, he faced Tony Gwynn, the all-time great Padre, several times. And Gwynn was like 0 for 14 against Mike Mims. Gwynn later said that he hated facing Mims because, quote, I couldn't see his arm tense up when he was throwing a slider. So, right now, imagine you're holding a baseball. Grip it. Now look at the tendon in your arm as you do it. It's the one that connects your palm and to the rest of your forearm. Look at that as you tense up, and notice how it changes when you throw a curveball, a slider, or a simple fastball. When you throw a slider, you can see that tendon kind of tense up a little bit. And according to Tony Gwynn, he looked for that when he was facing pitchers. If you saw that tensation, he would sit on a slider, and more often than not, he put the ball in play and get a hit. In fact, he was one of the very best hitters of all time. Now, I don't know if this story is true. It was told to me by Mike Mims himself, so maybe he was just egotistical. I wouldn't put him past him. But the idea here is the same. Batters will use any advantage they can to defeat you. It's their job. And Burns and Giolito and guys would kind of break their hands. As they did so, their arms would swing behind their backs, and batters could see the ball coming out of their hand a split second earlier. And from 60 feet away, it was still close enough that they could probably get a guess on what was coming. And they didn't do as well. So now there's this new thing where Pitching Ninja showed a breakdown of the mechanics and rotations and all sorts of things and how it's changed in 1 year. Last year, Burns, first of all, had a wind-up and was swinging his arm behind his back a little bit. Now he's not doing that. He's breaking straight out, has a much shorter arm action, and is increasing his strikeouts and decreasing his walk ratio. That's really good. And Giolito, whose change was the inception of the article, went from like a 6.09 ERA last year to something in the low threes. His FIP plummeted from 5.85 to 3.47. Giolito credited Driveline Baseball and Kyle Boddy with helping him turn his career around. The talent was always there. Giolito throws 98 miles an hour. He was taken with a 16th overall pick in 2012, first rounder, top prospect, given numerous chances to start. But until his age 26 season, just now, he had always underperformed. All he did was make one small change mechanically, and now he's doing really well. That's just something that I wanted to share with you because baseball really is about change, about increments. You change one thing, the rest will follow. It makes me wonder, which players out there playing right now can be superstars if they change today? Like, all it takes sometimes is for a mediocrity to develop a new pitch and all of a sudden they're an ace. Or for a hitter to change up their stance by crouching down a little bit or opening up earlier or doing an extra ritual, and all of a sudden they're going to win a batting title. How many times has this happened? How many times will it happen? Who can that happen to? And who is just one change away from being the next Mike Trout? I don't know. And that's why baseball is so fun and so tragic at the same time. You just never know. Speaking of, I guess, sadness, I don't mean to end this segment on a sad note, but it doesn't have to be. It could be hopeful. So, as you know, last week, the Angels cut ties with Albert Pujols. He wasn't playing that well. He's getting very old. They owed him $30 million. They just released him. And they actually did something called designating him for assignment. Designation for assignment. And what that means is that you are placed on waivers. And if you pass waivers, then you get released. And what that means for waivers is that you place a player on a waiver list. And what that means is that that player is like basically available for pickup. If another team wants that player, they can claim that player, and the commissioner's office has to approve the sale. And once it does, that player is now playing for a different team. But that team also takes on their contract. And so think about the kinds of players who do get placed on a waiver sheet. It's usually players that aren't very good but are owed a lot of money. So that's what the Angels try to do. Not surprisingly, no one picked up the tab on a late 30s first baseman with a history of leg issues and a $30 million contract. It's not going to happen. So Pujols cleared waivers, which means that now he's free to sign with whatever team he wants, and the Angels have to pay for it. So if a Diamondbacks, just for speculation, just to name an example, wanted Pujols, they just get him for free, basically. But it means that they have to play him. And right now, there aren't many teams for which Pujols is an upgrade. See what I'm saying? He can't play any position other than the first base or DH. And his first base skills are declining rapidly. So he's really a hit-only player who can't run. And that's declining. So I don't know. I really hope the Cardinals pick him up. But they have Paul Goldschmidt. And they are a team in the National League. They don't have a DH. So I don't know what's going to happen. I really hope that Pujols gets retired as a Cardinal. I just am concerned that it won't happen. Regardless, he was the best hitter of his generation, and we'll miss him greatly. Now, we're going to cut to the break. Thanks for sticking around. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Coming up next, we're going to talk about scores from around the league. Take care and have a great day.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Guys, do you know what's awesome? You. But also, what I'm about to tell you right now. So, this was posted on the Our Baseball Forum just 6 hours ago. If you don't know, Our Baseball is where I get all of my daily updates, all of my feed, just everything you want to know about contemporary baseball. It's on Reddit. Go to Our Baseball. You'll find it all there. That's r/baseball. So, one of the posts reads, Mike Bolsinger has refiled his lawsuit against the Astros in Harris County. Bolsinger claims the signs are trade secrets under Texas's Uniform Trade Secrets Act. He alleges, quote-unquote, willful and intentional misappropriation of trade secrets by the 2017 Astros. So if you don't know what's going on here right now, and I don't blame you, it was a long time ago, back in 2017, the Astros and the Dodgers played each other in the World Series. And it has now come to light that the Astros cheated in that World Series. John Boy, that's Jomboy, made a great video about this on YouTube, where he explained that they were using a crude but effective system where they had someone in the stands with a binoculars or some other kind of detection device deciphering the signs of the opposing pitchers, and they'd sign. So it would be a thump on the trash can, like so, to indicate a curveball, and there was no thump when it was a fastball. So if you heard the thump, like so, on the trash can in the Astros dugout, the hitter knew that a curveball was coming. He'd sit back and he'd do well with it. Their averages increased significantly when they knew the pitch was coming. There was an entire investigation, and the Astros were investigated for it. And many people, including Carlos Beltran and Alex Cora, were disciplined for their role in the scandal. What you probably didn't remember was that Mike Bolsinger, the guy I mentioned in question here, was a member... My cat's just screaming at me for no reason right now. I have a cat, and she insists on just making her presence known, especially when she wants my attention. So that's Lily. You'll be hearing a lot more from her from the podcast. So Bolsinger was a member of the 2017 Dodgers. That's right, Lily. Good job. So the Dodgers, of course, were were very successful, and they won the division title in 2017. They won the pennant, and they made it all the way to the World Series 2017, but they lost against the Dodgers. And, of course, we know now that that championship was tainted. So Bolsinger is now suing the Astros for stealing trade secrets, a.k.a. his signs. Now, there is absolutely no precedence for this. I'm not a lawyer yet. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years something will change. But as far as I know, just from my layman's perspective, there's been no precedent for this kind of thing. Previously, Bolsinger filed a lawsuit in California, and it was dismissed because of a lack of jurisdiction. Improper venue, actually. Because Bolsinger filed in California, and he's supposed to file it in Houston. Now he's doing it in Houston, in Harris County. We'll see where it goes, but that's interesting. I love when ball players get analytical on me, you know? Speaking of which, trivia question. We haven't done those in a while. Which Major League pitcher was the only player who was actively playing to have been a member of the Society for American Baseball Research? A. Craig Counsell. B. Ross Ohlendorf. C. Craig Breslow. Or D. Jeff Bajanaru. Think about it and get back to me. But in the meantime, this is interesting because Bolsinger, he was a Diamondback for a while. I remember him. Remember he went to the Dodgers, had some success there. And now he is filing a lawsuit to reclaim what he alleges is his rightful claim to the 2017 crown. So, good for him. I don't know if he's going to see, but I hope he does. If not for the actual merit of the case. Okay, this has to end. Lily. I don't know if Case is standing or not, but that's interesting, and I like interesting people. So good for him. Good for Mike. Lily concurs. Also in the news, Randy Johnson showed up for the game today between the Diamondbacks and whoever they played today. The Marlins, thank you. So, the big unit came back, and he looks different now. So, he now has a goatee that's long and fluffy, as opposed to his trimmed, almost manicured appearance now. His hair's been cut shorter, and he still has that habitual snarl on his face. And, of course, Johnson was the best pitcher in Diamondbacks history. After he retired, he became a photographer, and now I guess he's spectating the game. I just have to think he'd be an amazing interview subject. He's not gregarious or active as an interviewer. He's curmudgeon, to be sure. But clearly, he's one of the best players in Major League Baseball history. And you'd have to imagine that guys like that are just interesting subjects. So it's good to see he's back in baseball, at least in this capacity. More news. I mentioned Corbin Burns, right? I hope I did. And I mentioned Pujols getting DFA'd. Ouch. I read that un momento. I'm just trying to see something here. The problem with doing a show that's live is that you're trying to find topics of conversation while at the same time you're trying to find things that aren't irrelevant, and it's just kind of difficult. Here's a good one. So, Lance Lynn, the pitcher, has thrown 97.6% fastballs this year. Yep, I said that right. Lance Lynn, the pitcher, has thrown nearly 98% of fastballs this year. Now, granted, this metric's counting both sinkers and cutters as fastballs. So if you regard those as three different pitches, then he's throwing different pitches, but they're not off-speed pitches, I don't think. So he's thrown, I would call it 98% fastballs this year, which is just incredible. That's just great news. After that, I guess that we could talk about, Hunter Renfroe today, playing for the Red Sox, made an amazing throw to from right field all the way to third base. Got somebody out on an assist. Amazing throw. You have to kind of see it. All right, contemporary stuff. I want to go ahead and read aloud some scores from around the league. Scores from around the league, and you're going to love it. And I think that some of this stuff should come as no surprise. So let's just go ahead and mention some stuff here. So the first game we saw today was the Blue Jays and the Braves. But you know what? Screw it. I want to talk about one more thing before I talk about contemporary baseball. I want to talk about something my mom texted me. So, that's right, Lily, we love our moms. So, my mom is not a huge baseball fan. She loves watching baseball, but we have to explain to her what's going on. So, but she tries, and sometimes she sends me articles and text messages, and those are my favorite messages because that's what we connect. That's what I can try to connect with. So, today my mom sent me a really nice text, a news article from the Miami Herald about the games between the Marlins and the Diamondbacks. It was a recap, and my mom just mentioned how, verbatim, I'm watching MLB Central, and they're talking about Garrett Cole being a bully on the mound. So I watch, and he's staring down hitters after strikeouts. And then Chapman, I'm assuming Aroldis, seems to be getting on it too. Whatever happened to letting your play do your talking? And it's just kind of funny. What I texted her back was that the scowl has been part of baseball since baseball has been baseball. So it's no secret that pitchers need a psychological advantage. There was this book that I read when I was in high school called The Mental ABCs of Baseball. And it was a book that basically argued that baseball is a psychological sport. It isn't just a sport that's based on physicality. It's also your mental toughness and your approach to life. And at the time, it mentioned that affirmations were important. Like, if you sat down for 5 minutes a day, or whatever it took to get it right, you'd sit down and visualize yourself getting a hit up the middle, or throwing a perfect fastball at the corner. You'd visualize yourself doing this, and you'd repeat phrases and mantras in your head, like, take a deep breath and deliver, or pea socks, plan, sketch, outline, color, shade, which was my mantra when I was a kid, doing something else. And the point is that they'd say, connect your mantra with your visualizations, and that's going to create an affirmation in your mind. And if you could do that, you will have a better performance because your brain and your body will synchronize. And they talked about how the pessimist says one thing like, oh, geez, this pitcher's incredible and I suck. I'm batting .220. I'm probably going to strike out in 4 pitches. And the optimist says, I'm going to take a good swing at the ball. And the book just mentioned that people who had a systems-oriented outlook and positivity and focused on bringing a good attitude to work were more likely to succeed. And at the time I read this, I was like a 17-year-old smartass. I'll say it. I didn't think that was a serious book. I just kind of figured that was a stupid pseudoscientific novel. I was like, no. Clearly, that doesn't matter. Mental health and that kind of mental ABC game of baseball, that's just pseudoscience. It's nonsense. But now that I'm older, I think that's everything. I used to think that baseball was 95% how well you play the game and 5% anything else. And now I think it's closer to the opposite. Think about it this way. The difference between, assuming 500 at-bats, the difference between someone who hits 300 and someone who hits 275 is 1 hit every 2 weeks. The difference between someone who's in the big leagues and someone who's in AAA, physically, is probably nothing. It's just about who gets the extra 2%. Who can get an extra base hit every 2 weeks? Who can get 1 extra strikeout per start? who can make one extra catch a season that someone else can't. And that makes a difference between you being a superstar and being, well, not playing. So mentally being tough is a big deal. And my mom, when she sent that, it was probably just an innocent way just to, check in on me. Like, hey son, here's an article I found. But it opens a really interesting question of how much of baseball is nature and how much of it is nurture. Like, obviously we look at people like Giancarlo Stanton and we think that he just came out of the egg like that. He was born, he's a 6'8" freak of nature, 270 pounds of shredded muscle. You can't, that guy is always going to be successful. But maybe not. I mean, I really do think that baseball is a mental battle. And any advantage you can get is probably worth everything. So pitchers scowl, and pitchers do that glare thing that they do because if the goal makes the batter feel uncomfortable even a little bit, it's worth it. And that's been around since baseball was a thing. So off the top of my head, I can think of many players that did that. Bob Gibson, for example. In the documentary Fastball, the eponymous documentary, Bob Gibson was interviewed, and he said that he had poor eyesight, and he would kind of look over his glove at the catcher to see better. And it was reported that he was scowling at the batter because he looked intimidating. But it seemed to work because batters felt uncomfortable when they're in the box against him because he looked scary. And that worked out well. Guys like Al Hrabosky, the Mad Hungarian, did that all the time for effect. Guys like Burleigh Grimes would refuse to shave on game day so they'd have a 5 o'clock stubble. This is back when facial hair was seen as kind of risque, back in like the 30s. So he just wouldn't shave. He had like this stubble, and he was called Old Stubblebeard because he looked tough on the mound. People like Roger Clemens would glare all the time. The aforementioned Randy Johnson would do it to effect. Garrett Cole clearly does it. And Chapman, of course, is just terrifying on the mound. And all of that is because somewhere along the line, they came to believe that looking tougher made them so. And that's why they all do it. So that was just an interesting question. And I have to wonder if celebrations are the same way. I don't think celebrating a home run, like I don't know, like you ever see Juan Soto hit a home run? Most obnoxious thing ever. Like that guy should get drilled every time he comes with a bat. I don't care. But I have to wonder if psychologically it helps him out more than it hurts him. Because if you go up to the plate and you like sashay around the batter's box and you hit a home run and you pimp it out and you gesticulate and you make faces, maybe it brings your confidence up and empowers you to do it again with more regularity. In which case, it's probably a welcome action and not a distraction. I don't know. But baseball, my point is that it's just a mental game through and through, and it really matters. So that was pretty great. And I'm trying to think what else. Oh yeah, my mom sent me one more text. And this is from a friend of hers on Facebook who wrote, there should be a, quote, there should be a rule in baseball saying that if a manager goes out to argue after a review, he's automatically ejected from the game. Let me say that one more time. So this opinion is that if a manager comes, like if there's a ruling on the field and there's a computerized review and they make their decision and the manager comes out to argue against that decision, then he should be ejected automatically. I think that's the dumbest opinion possible. Now, I feel very strongly about this, and I'm going to watch my language. This is a Christian channel. I'm not going to curse, but this is really important. The question is, who watches the watchmen? The umpires playing right now, as a group, suck at their jobs. They're missing more calls than ever, and the amount of plays that have to be overturned upon review has skyrocketed since it was introduced. Umpires, in large part because of their union protection, are secure and they're not motivated to do better. They're missing more and more calls ever before, including ones that are replayable. See, the problem with replay is that it is not infallible. It's left to the discretion of people reviewing the play up in a command station in New York. They only can use the footage available to them on the broadcast network. So if there is an angle that the broadcast network didn't pick up, they can't use that information to rule on it. So oftentimes, there will be play at the plate, and there's only one or two angles of the play, and it's unclear what happened. And at the time, the ruling appeal gets upheld because they can't find dissenting information, and then later comes out from a fan video or something that they got it wrong. That happens frequently. After that, there are many plays which aren't even reviewable at all, where the umpire blew a call. Obviously, the manager comes out to try to challenge it, and the umpire says, "Sorry, that play's not reviewable." Excuse me? You blew a call, and now what? You can't review it? The whole point of this rule is that we're supposed to be able to fix your mistakes, and now can you get that right? I was watching a video by John Boy. I mentioned him earlier on the podcast. And they're showing a play at the plate where even though from the own broadcast video, it was clear that he was safe. He was called out. They reviewed it. They looked at the video and the command center, and they still got the play wrong. And then the umpire came out to tell the umpire that he was blind as a bat, and he got ejected. And my point is this. If you believe umpires are good at their jobs and that they care about making good decisions, then of course this proposal is reasonable, but umpires don't deserve any respect anymore because they keep getting calls wrong over and over again, and they frankly can't be trusted to not screw up easy plays. This year, umpires have missed more calls than any other year. This is a disgrace. C.B. Buckner, Angel Hernandez, so many more people, Joe West, should just not be playing baseball right now. This is because the umpires' unions are holding back talented umpires in the minor leagues from succeeding and getting their chances at big leagues, and they're preventing the bad umpires, the Ron Copas, and so on, from getting fired. And this is why we need reform. I think Rob Manfred's done a terrible job. I think he's done a terrible job. He has changed everything for the worse. He's a power of the wrong people. He's getting political. I don't want that. And he's just making his duty to make baseball unwatchable. And I encourage you to consider watching baseball through an alternative means. For example, I watch baseball these days from Australia. In the winters, Australian baseball is well and active, and I had a great time watching that. And Japanese baseball is great too. Korean baseball is pretty great too. And there are more leagues in the Czech Republic, in Poland, almost everywhere that are trying to start up their own leagues. You can even watch games from semi-pro teams here at home. Sugarland Skeeters, well, I guess they're a AAA team now. But the Somerset Patriots, there are lots of Tucson Saguaros. There are lots of teams that play in professional semi-pro teams that are dying reviewers. They're worth a listen to. I think if baseball is going to continue to not make the game better, we should reward other leagues that are trying to keep baseball the same. So just consider watching a different form of baseball this year. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, thanks for listening. Stick around for more after the break. We'll be talking about... That's right, Lily. We'll be talking about contemporary baseball still, stats, scores, updates from around the league, and then we'll conclude the episode by talking about all the best ways to cheat in baseball. You don't want to miss that. Stick around for more, only at the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thank you very much.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
What's up, babes? It's the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm still the host. This is Graham. And, I just remembered that I should have said my name at the beginning of the podcast episode. I didn't do it. Please forgive me. This is Graham. I'm back in Birmingham, still talking baseball. And I want to give you guys an update around the standings from the league. So, I don't know if the microphone picked it up or not. My cat's still screeching at me for some reason. She wants some treats, but they're downstairs. I can't go there yet. So she's getting really upset because I'm not going to leave my station to go find her some tuna flakes. I can't do it. So now she's just going to sit here and just complain. Watch. I want to try to pick her up. Maybe it's going to make her calm down. Hey, what's up, Lily? Hey, what's up? Alright, she's on my lap now. This usually calms her down. She's really clingy, and she just loves sitting on my lap because it makes her feel special. So, hopefully, we'll have no further disruptions from this episode. Ain't that right, Lily? Alright. Well, Lily, I guess you're our tonight's guest. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? Do you have any products you want to, endorse? Okay, so Lily is pretty quiet right now. I'm just going to get back to work. So, the best teams around the league in the American League is the Boston Red Sox at 23-16. Boston is 11-11 at home, but on the road they've dominated away from Fenway Park. A run differential of plus 36. I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, but I really like run differential as a predictor of future success. I think we can all agree that sometimes teams win games when they really shouldn't. Like sometimes, you win a game based on an umpire, like Angel Hernandez making number one of his calls that just loses the game for everybody. Or sometimes there's a freak interference call or something. It happens all the time where you win games or you lose games that you shouldn't have. So, I like looking at run differential because if you're consistently scoring more runs than your opponent, that's a good sign that you are a solid team. So oftentimes there are teams that have records where they have a losing overall record, but their differential is plus double digits. And that usually means that they're going to turn it around. Because statistically speaking, anomalies are, anomalies. These things usually do average out over time. And 162 games is a long time for a sporting season. So, the Red Sox are leading their division by a game and a half. They have a differential of plus 36. So, that's aligned. Good for them. Second in the AL East is the Toronto Blue Jays at 20-16. They're 1.5 games back of the Red Sox, but their differential is plus 34, and they've won 3 games in a row compared to just 1 for the Red Sox. So far, so good. Number 3 is the Yankees. The New York Yankees. Probably my second favorite team, which for a Diamondbacks fan is blasphemy, but I like the Yankees. I just like classical things. And the Yankees, love them or hate them, are America's team. 20-17, 2 games back, +8 run differential. Next up is the Tampa Bay Rays. 2019, 3 games back, differential of +6. Overall, pretty good. Then there's the Orioles, and they're doing better than I expected. I have this one friend named Darren, I should say, Darren. I don't want to dox him. Darren, who's a big Orioles fan. He grew up watching Mark Bellinger and guys like him, so he's a big fan of the Baltimore club. They are 16-21, last in the AL East, 6 games back, differential of -20. But considering their differential, they should be doing worse than just a few games below 500. So overall, I'm okay with that. The Orioles are keeping their head relatively above water. I mean, they're not where they want to be, granted, but they're doing better than I expected them. So, in 10 years, I think the Orioles could be pretty good. They have a tough division, but they could be okay. They could be okay. Now it's time for the AL Central. Chicago White Sox. I gotta say, I love Chicago. Great city. I want to move there someday. Chicago White Sox are 22-13. Leading their division. +66 run differential. The best team in terms of differential in the American League. Here's what I mean by differential versus your record. The Red Sox have a better record in terms of wins, at least. They have more wins than the White Sox. But the White Sox have a much better differential. And they're hot, too. They've won 6 straight games for a record of 8-2 for their past 10 games. That's really good. The White Sox are just red hot right now, and I'm here for it. Definitely my favorite team from Chicago. America's third favorite city. Number 2 is the Cleveland Indians. Somehow, even after trading away Lindor, the Indians are hanging on. 21-14, 1 game back, +19 differential. That's really good. And plus, they've won 4 straight games, and for the last 9, let me look it up. For the last, 10 games, they're 9-1. So they've won 90% of the last 10 games, which is excellent. Now third in the AL Central is a sad story. So a few weeks ago, the Royals were off to a great start, and I remarked that they were doing better than I expected. And it's all kind of come to a heel today. Because the Royals are now 16-20. They have a winning percentage of .444, a differential of -35, and, hold on to your hats, they have lost their last 11 games. Whew, that's pretty bad. Like, Jesus, what do you even say about that? Just 11 games in a row. I wonder what the longest losing streak was. Like, if not 11, what was the longest losing streak in baseball history? Let me look it up right now. The great thing about the show is that I'm just doing all this on the fly. I've done no research beforehand. That's right, this is a high-quality episode. Longest losing season baseball. Let me Google this. Longest losing streaks in Major League Baseball history, regular season. Okay, so the longest losing streak was back in 1889. The Louisville Colonels lost 26 straight games. In modern ages, let's see. Let me look this up. In modern times, the Kansas City Royals in 2005 lost 19 straight games. Wow. Before then, In 1988, the Orioles lost 21 straight games. In 1975, the Tigers also lost 19 straight games. That's pretty shocking. To reiterate, though, the longest total streak was the Colonels. They lost 26 straight games. And that season, they went 27 and 111, which is just incredible. Number 2 on that list is the Cleveland Spiders in 1899, who lost 24 straight games for a record. This is the worst record in Major League Baseball history, by the way, of 20 and 134. The 1899 Cleveland Spiders were the worst team in Major League Baseball history. And let me see if I can find a Wikipedia page about that, because this has to be just... Yeah, here it is. Okay, I've got it. Okay. So, in 1899, the Cleveland Spiders, and I remember the story now. So, the Cleveland Spiders had some owners called the Robison brothers, and they purchased the St. Louis Browns. Okay? So, these brothers owned both the Spiders and the Browns at the same time, playing in the same division. So this, of course, is completely illegal now. You can't own two teams which are supposed to be competitors nominally. You can't do it. But these brothers did. They bought two teams in the same league. It's like if you purchased the White Sox and the Royals and at the same time. Because the fear is what happened in real life right now, which is that the Robisons did some real estate analysis and figured out that the St. Louis location was more profitable than the Cleveland location. They figured out that St. Louis was a better market than Cleveland, so therefore, they put all their resources into the St. Louis team. And that meant they transferred the Cleveland players to the St. Louis Ball Club. Let me repeat that one more time. This is as if like you owned the White Sox and the Royals at the same time, and you sent Giolito and Luis Robert and Jose Abreu at the same time to the Royals. This is absurd. But the Robisons treated the Cleveland Spiders team like a farm system for the Browns. So they just simply moved Cy Young, Hall of Famer Jesse Burkett, and Hall of Famer Bobby Wallace to St. Louis. And they also shifted a large number of Cleveland home games to the road. So, for example, because they thought that the home location was so not profitable, they'd lose money. So they made virtually every single one of Cleveland's games a road game. So the Spiders didn't even have a team. Their team was just full of nobody because it had been gutted by management. And every time that someone would start hitting well, they get sent to the St. Louis team, which is just incredible. So let me look up their roster and just read out to you some names. So for the 1899 Cleveland Spiders team, their pitchers were Frank Bates, Kid Carsey, Harry Cauliflower, Jack Harper, Bill Hill, Jim Huey, Charlie Nepper, Eddie Kolb, Harry Maupin, Willie Sudhoff, and Highball Wilson. Now, some of these guys weren't terrible. I seem to remember that Harry Maupin was okay for a while. Nope, I was wrong. He was pretty bad. I know Crazy Schmidt and Aussie Schreckengost, who was also on the team, were good friends. But, and yeah, his name's Crazy Schmidt. That was his name. He was a pitcher. But he was pretty notorious for just being nuts, obviously. Willie Sudhoff played for a long time. He didn't suck, but at the time that he was playing, he was pretty old. And Highball Wilson, I seem to remember, was okay for a while. For catchers, Aussie Schreckengost was well known. He was a big fan, and he was a big friend of Rube Waddell, and was his designated catcher and roommate for many years, which is how he's most famously remembered these days. And Aussie at one point is famous because he ordered Waddell to stop eating crackers in the bed and wrote a no crackers in the bed contract in clause to Waddell's contract, which is pretty famous. Aussie was also the last catcher to play without wearing shin guards. That's how I remember him. But there were guys like Joe Sugden. And Joe Sugden, I mentioned, was one of the replacement players. I mentioned this guy on the last podcast episode. Joe Sugden was one of the players who replaced a regular guy when Ty Cobb was suspended in 1912. Listen to my last episode. It's called Merlin's episode to learn more about the story. But Joe Sugden counted on his team regularly. Lave Cross was really good, actually. And he was on the team, too. But he was young at the time. He was very young. So he wasn't the guy he was going to be. And Tom McDowell was okay, too. But, yeah, I mean, that's it. Besides Lave Cross, no one on this team was very good. And they were all terrible. The leader in batting average that year was Joe Quinn, third baseman, who batted .286. In home runs, the leader was Tommy Dowd. In RBIs, it was Joe Quinn again. For other batters, they mentioned this here. Chief Zimmer did pretty well. Ossie Schreckengost hit okay. Lave Cross did well too. But this team as a whole just wasn't very good. And every time that you do okay, you get traded. And the pitching was particularly terrible. Eddie Kolb had an ERA of 10.13. Hybel Wilson, 9.0. Cauliflower, 8.17. Frank Bates, 7.24. I could go on, but you get the drift. And that's what happened. They just gutted this team. And the Spiders had a one-loss record of 20 wins and 134 losses, .130, the worst in Major League Baseball history. They were 84 games behind the Brooklyn Superboss team and 35 games behind the penultimate Washington Senators. They were 3 whole months out of first place, which is just nuts. And the Robinsons announced, after they purchased the St. Louis club, they wanted to run the Spiders as a sideshow. In Cleveland, the fans took them at their word. The Spiders' first 16 home games drew a total of 3,179 fans, an average of 199 fans per game. Due to these attendance figures, the other 11 NL teams refused to play in League Park, the Cleveland's home stadium, because they didn't want to lose money. The way revenues work is that the home team is entitled to 60% of the gate revenue, and the away team is entitled to 40% of the gate revenue. So clearly, you'd be losing a lot of money if you went to play a game at a team where their fans didn't show up. So that's what happened. And the revenue from ticket sales didn't even cover the hotel and travel expenses. The Spiders played 85 of their last 93 games on the road. They played only 42 games at home, only 8 after July 1st, and they finished 11 and 101 on the road. I mean, that's just incredible. They lost 101 games on the road, and pitchers Jim Huey and Charlie Nepper were 4-30 and 4-22, and tied for the team lead in wins. Their longest winning streak of the season was just 2 games, which they accomplished from May 20th to May 21st. Their opponents scored 10 or more runs 49 times in 154 games. That is just incredible. The only other teams that have come even close to being as bad as they were the 1962 New York Mets. That year, the Mets went 40 and 120. And the 2003 Detroit Tigers went 43 and 119. That's bad, but they weren't Cleveland Spiders bad. Anyway, I forgot to talk about contemporary baseball. After the break, I'll do that for real this time. And I'll tell you about all the ways players used to cheat and how they got away with it. Stay tuned for more, only at the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thank you very much.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It's your boy, Graham, and by the way, guys, I apologize. I was supposed to talk about contemporary baseball, but I just kind of got off track. I got a little, I don't know what's the word for someone who just focuses on something and just loses track, scatterbrained, maybe. But we're talking about contemporary baseball now. So, just to blow past it, the Tigers are bad, 13-24, 10 games back, negative 64 run differential. The Twins are 12-23, 10 games back, negative 15 run differential, lost for the last 4 games. AL West, the Athletics are 23-16, negative 13 run differential. Astros are number 2, 21-17. Mariners are 18-20, Rangers are 18-20, Angels are 16-20. In the NL, the Mets and the Phillies and the Marlins are doing great. The Cards and the Brewers are doing great. The Giants and the Padres and the Dodgers are doing fine. My Diamondbacks, 17-21, negative 9 run differential. I'm thinking we do mediocre this year. All right, that's enough contemporary baseball. I want to talk about my favorite subject, which is cheating in baseball. See, I just think that the art of getting an edge is fascinating to me. Baseball is a game of margins. You don't win a game. No, actually, it's a game of scale. It's a game of scale. I get those two mixed up all the time. It's a game of scale because if you just get an extra 1% every time you play a game, over time it adds up. It adds up really quickly. And being able to get an edge is everything. As Rogers Hornsby once said, if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying. And there's a book that I have called The Baseball Codes. Beanballs, Sign Stealing, and Bench Clearing Brawls. The Inside Story of Major League Baseball. It's a great book, and I need to reread it. I haven't read it in years, but tonight I thought about what to do for a topic, and this came up. So, Frank Robinson once wrote that cheating is a gray area. Some of that stuff might be against the rules or against some code, but none of it is against the law, he said. There's nothing wrong with trying to find an edge. That's smart, not cheating. And there was a great story where, in 1987, George Steinbrenner was watching the Yankees play the Angels on TV, and he was shocked when the camera zoomed in and showed close-ups on Angels pitcher Don Sutton's left hand. And on Sutton's left hand, and by the way, Sutton's from Clio, Alabama represent. On Sutton's left hand, there was, well, something. It appeared there was like a bandage or a patch on Sutton's left hand, and every time the pitcher came set, he started to grind the ball into his hand unnaturally. And the announcers were remarking that it seemed like Sutton was cheating or something. Like maybe there was a foreign substance on his hand. So the theory was Sutton was scuffing the ball. There was sandpaper or something on his hand. He was scratching the ball, and therefore he's causing movement that was preternatural. So, furious, Steinbrenner called up the manager, Lou Piniella, and lit into him. And was like, Lou, well, he said, our television announcers are aware of it, yelled Steinbrenner. I'm sure the Angels are aware of it. You're probably the only guy out there who doesn't know it. Now, I want you to go out there and make the umpires check Don Sutton. Now, Don Sutton being a cheater wasn't exactly secret news back in those days. He had been thrown out of a game in '78, just 9 years earlier, for scuffing the ball. In 1981, Don Sutton appeared in a documentary on TV where he detailed the ways that other pitchers cheated. And even though Sutton was in a disguise and there was anonymity, his identity was leaked. And he was known to participate in the documentary where he talked about how to cheat in baseball. And by the time the Yankees broadcast were talking about Sutton cheating, he was already kind of known for skirting the line. And so George Steinbrenner lit into Piniella and said, make them check Don Sutton. And Piniella responded, George, the guy who taught Don Sutton how to cheat is the guy pitching for us tonight. Do you really want me to go out there and get Tommy John thrown out of game 2? And that's the story about cheating, right? As Ozzie Guillen said, the former White Sox manager, everyone cheats. If you don't get caught, you're a smart player. If you do get caught, you're cheating. It's been part of the game for a long time. If you're doing whatever you're not supposed to do and don't get caught, keep doing it. And that happens so many different ways. There are myriad ways you can cheat and get away with it. So, for example, Norm Cash, the Tigers star in the early on, sometimes when he was on base during a rain delay, they'd break for the rain delay. They'd come back after the rain let up. Everyone turns to their position. Everyone turns to their base. And Norm Cash would move up 90 feet. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just move up extra base and hope that everyone forgot about it. Never worked, but he just tried. And at one point, in 1941, different player, Tigers spitballer Tommy Bridges threw a spitball that broke so severely it bounced away from the catcher Bertie Tebbetts. When the Yankees manager Joe McCarthy asked the umpire to check the ball for signs of tampering, both the Tebbetts, the catcher, and the hitter, Joe Gordon, ran after the ball. Tebbetts, the catcher, got to there first, and with the bases empty, he threw the ball into the outfield. And the outfielders just caught the ball and started throwing it back and forth between each other, like playing catch in the middle of the game. And the umpire started running out there saying, what the hell are you doing? Stop throwing the ball around. But they throw the ball, drop intentionally, rub it in the dirt, pick it up, and throw it to somebody else, playing hot potato for like 20 seconds. And when the umpire finally caught the ball, I mean, it was clean. Like, now it was tampered, now there was dirt and like grass stains and everything on it, but there was no clear sign of what was Tommy Bridges doing and what was that little charade in the outfield. Basically, Bridge now had plausible deniability, and the ball and him were allowed to continue playing. Rogers Hornsby was, of course, the greatest second baseman of all time. He had 358 for his career, and he wrote a story in True magazine titled, "You've Got to Cheat to Win in Baseball." He wrote there, quote, "I've been in pro baseball since 1914, and I've cheated or watched somebody on my team cheat in practically every game. You've got to cheat. I know if I played strictly by the rules, I'd have been home feeding my bird dogs a long time ago." By Hornsby's own estimation, cheating was all that stood between him and a lifetime of kennel work. And at one point, later, Earl Weaver, during a game, went out to the mound to talk to his pitcher, Ross Grimsley, with the bases loaded, walked there and just said simply, "Well, son, if you know how to cheat, this is a good time to start." That's pretty great. And that payoff of reward is really important. As you probably know, the easy way for pitchers to cheat is to doctor the baseball. One of the ways to do it is with pine tar. And of course, the eponymous spit in spitball. So what does that do for a pitcher? What does that do for anybody? Well, all of those things, spit and Vaseline, jelly, tar, they're all considered to be foreign substances, and they're all banned from use under two official rules. Rule 3.02, which states that, quote, no player shall intentionally discolor or damage the ball by rubbing it with soil, rosin, paraffin, licorice, or other foreign substances. There's also a rule called 8.02 A6, which says the pitcher shall not deliver what is called the shine ball, spitball, mud ball, or emery ball. Generally speaking, prohibited substances fall into two categories: those that add friction and those that remove it. Tacky substances like pine tar, or even mud, or even the rosin bag behind the mound, which is legal, are used by pitchers to improve grip in cold weather. But the grip can also add snap to a breaking ball, or by weighing down one side of a baseball over another, can induce extra movement and sink. And that's why some players would throw a mud ball. You just take some dirt from the mound when it's wet and heavier, just apply it to a ball and you throw it, and the extra pressure and weight would cause the ball to move away from the direction of the mud on the ball. So it could sink really hard if you just have an extra ounce of weight on top of it. That's really important. And slick substances like petroleum jelly create what's known as a spitball. They allow pitchers to deliver offerings at a near fastball speed, but with less rotation, because the ball squirts out of the hand as opposed to just being spun or just thrown across the seams. The lack of backspin provides a late drop. Think of how a knuckleball moves. A spitball is designed to do the same thing. If you remove spin, you can also get movement for different reasons. Vaseline is the best, and KY jelly is the second best, said former manager Charlie Fox. Said Fox, the advantage to KY jelly is that it doesn't adhere to the ball, and it cannot be detected by the umpire. Balls with Vaseline will be hit on the ground, and there will be like a big glob of dirt that sticks to them, and that's obvious. These substances can be hit virtually anywhere on a player's body, on his uniform, under his cap, on his pants, somewhere else. Dodgers manager Charlie Dressen used to cut pieces of slippery elm bark. Slippery elm bark slivers, when you chew them, produce saliva. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I'm reading it right now from the book, The Baseball Codes. But according to this book, slippery elm bark, when you chew it, produces saliva, far more than what you'd usually produce. So Charlie would cut those into pieces, like gum, and wrap them together, so the pitchers could pop them to their mouths during the game, and just, produce spit for spitballs. Doc Ellis, the guy who I made an entire episode on earlier in the podcast series, who threw no-hitter on LSD, remember him? He would wear hair curlers on the field. Hair curlers, which looked ridiculous back then. But it would also collect beads of sweat at the end of them, which he would use to just kind of touch and get just droplets of sweat that he could use to apply to the baseball. In the 1980s, Billy Martin, the manager of Oakland A's, ordered his pitchers to basically put baby oil in their legs. They put their uniform pants on over their legs, of course, and the baby oil would seep through the pant legs and be available for easy adhesion to the ball during the game. So if you sat down there and you like kind of touch your pant leg and scratch it for a little bit, nonchalantly, you'd get some extra tack. And you could use that to throw a doctored baseball. And there's a pitcher named George Frazier for the Yankees who would keep a shampoo that made his hair exceptionally oily, and he'd put it on during game days. So during game, when he pitched, he'd just try this disgusting shampoo that made his hair super oily. He'd just touch his hair, and that would make it, and he would get oil sufficient to make his ball move. And John Wyatt, a closer for the A's, kept a little stash of Vaseline inside his own mouth. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I just think that the whole idea of doctoring baseball is interesting. The story is that in the early 1970s, people started throwing the spitball. Foreign substances were outlawed in the game's earliest days. Like, you weren't allowed to take like a nail file to the mound, even back then in the 1870s. But you were allowed, but saliva was not disallowed because it probably didn't occur to them. They were like, you can't, add extra stuff to the baseball. You just can't do it. But back then, saliva wasn't obviously disallowed, so people would use that instead. And that worked for a while. So Ed Walsh, for instance, was a Hall of Famer who used his spitball to make it to the Hall of Fame. And there's an interesting story about that. So there was a pitcher named Matty O'Toole. And Matty O'Toole was a spitballer. And his method of spitballing was to lick the baseball. So he'd hold the baseball up to his face and just lick it like that. He would lick the baseball directly and then just throw it. And remember, for a while, spitballs weren't illegal. In the 1920s, the Major League Baseball outlawed it because they claimed that the decreased control was making dangerous for batters to hit. So 17 spitballers were put on a list and grandfathered into a clause which allowed them to continue throwing the spitball until they retired. The last one of them was Burleigh Grimes, who was a Hall of Famer, and also the best. But yeah, so Matty O'Toole, I think it's actually Marty O'Toole. Marty O'Toole would just kind of lick the baseball directly before throwing it. He was one of those guys who's grandfathered in. So one day, the other players were getting so sick of that act that they put liniment on the baseball and just gave it to him for the game. So during the game, like the first baseman just kind of rubbed liniment on the baseball, and Marty O'Toole just like tried to lick it, and his tongue got burned, and he had to stop pitching for that day. And that's just that was back in the days when baseball was a lawless place. Rob Manfred would never let that happen these days. And here's a pretty funny story. So another guy who used to throw spitballs was Whitey Ford, the Hall of Fame pitcher. In the 1960s, Ford once mixed up a concoction of turpentine, baby oil, and rosin that made a tack. And he stored this concoction, which he would use to cheat. Obviously, like you grab a handful of it and you just basically load up the ball and you throw it. He stored it in his locker in a pseudo deodorant container. So he would just keep his locker freely, no fear. People wouldn't expect a thing. And that's where he would get his stash of tacky substance. One day, Yogi Berra grabbed that deodorant, thinking that it was deodorant, put it on his armpits, and just stuck there. And his armpit hair had to be cut away to free him from the stuff. And that's pretty great. And I wanted to also mention that another famous one was Gaylord Perry, who wrote a book called Mean and Spitter. And I could write an entire episode about him. And I want to just mention, too, from the Wikipedia page about spitballs, and I'm going to wrap the episode right here, that Ed Walsh popularized it. And it was outlawed after Ray Chapman in 1920 was killed due to an errant fastball by the pitcher Carl Mays. Now, Carl Mays was believed to have killed him with a spitball. So Ray Chapman, the batter, was hit in the head by a spitball from Carl Mays and died from it later on. Now, of course, the moral should have been don't bat without a helmet. But instead, baseball chose to deal with it by banning spitballs, which is interesting. And it appears on the Wikipedia page that slippery elm bark apparently does work. It's on the Wikipedia page for spitballs. And the guys who were exempt from retiring and were allowed to continue from spitball for the rest of their careers were Burleigh Grimes, Ray Fisher, Doc Ayers, Ray Caldwell, Phil Douglas, Dana Fillingham, Marv Goodwin, Dutch Leonard, Alan Russell, Alan Sotheron, Dick Rudolph, Stan Kowalski, Urban Shocker, Bill Doak, Clarence Mitchell, Red Faber, and Jack Quinn. In addition to Burleigh Grimes, of course. After that, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, that's basically it. Ball tampering, yeah, that's what it is. There's more ways to tamper a baseball besides that, of course. You can use a nail file. You could use a drill. You can try to just scuff the ball up intentionally. Some people bring out like a thumbtack and just simply poke holes in the ball. There are many ways you can ruin a baseball and throw it so it moves differently. But that's a topic for another day. For now, that's all the time we have. I need to wrap this up. My name is Grammy Vina. This has been the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for next week. Have a great day. Peace.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.